So today we're going to talk about CV development, which is part of our employability skills webinar. Now, this is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to talk about what does curriculum vitae mean? We're going to talk about when you would use a CV, what is it for, what information should be used on a CV. We're going to talk about building a CV and also about covering letters. But first of all, an interesting fact, and that is the one in this blue bubble here on the right-hand side. Did you know that on average, an employer only spends about 6 seconds reviewing a CV? Today, you will find out how to create a CV which hooks an employer in this time. And this, I think it's fair to say, that has changed quite a lot in the last, say, well, 20 years anyway, maybe even 10 years, I would say. Certainly when I started off in the hospitality industry, recruiting, it used to be the case that if I was looking for, I don't know, a new bartender or a new waiter or something along those lines, I would advertise at the local job center or in a local newspaper. And within, I don't know, maybe 10 days or 2 weeks, I would maybe get, I don't know, 12, 15 CVs, that kind of stuff. And then I would kind of look through them, take my time, and then just call the ones that look the best and invite them for an interview. Nowadays, things are slightly different, since we have emails and internet and job portals, websites, and all that kind of stuff. Things are very, very different. The reality is nowadays that if an employer puts out a job vacancy anywhere, really, that within just a few hours or a few days, they have hundreds of CVs sometimes for a vacancy. And the problem is for an employer is that they know that some of these CVs that they get are not always genuine. And what I mean by that is these guys are sometimes just sending out their applications so that they can show their advisor at the job center that they are actively job searching. And they're not necessarily always particularly interested in each of these positions that they are applying for. What that means is that creates a lot more work for the employer, because nobody in the world can look through 100 CVs within a few days. So that's why this 6 seconds is actually entirely possible and realistic, because these guys will open a CV, they will look at it literally just for a couple of seconds. If they don't find immediately what they're looking for, they will just delete it. And they spend a little bit more time with those CVs that are, first of all, presented well, that have the right information on it, the right experience or education, even whatever they need for this particular position. So it is really quite challenging nowadays for an employer just to go through this volume of applications. I think we're working quite closely with Nando's restaurants, and I had a figure from one of the local restaurant managers in Edinburgh who told me that when they put out a job ad onto Total Jobs, or no, it's Indeed, I think they're using, that within, I think, 4 weeks or so, they have like 500 applications. I mean,
wow.
It's just incredible. And they are struggling. Just, if you are a restaurant manager and you have a restaurant to run, how can you find time to look through 500 CVs in a month? That's impossible. So that's why it's quite frustrating for a lot of people who say, they're sending out CV after CV after CV and they never hear back. And that's the reality of the situation, is these managers just don't have the time to go through this volume of applications. And that's why it's very, very important to make sure that your CV really captures the attention of the employer within just a few seconds there. And hopefully today we're going to be able to help you with that one. Okay, now, if we don't have any questions, let's just move on then. So the first question, very, very simple one is then, guys, and I'd like you to take your very, very best guess. I'll give you this much. Curriculum vitae is Latin. And I want you to give me your best guess. What do you think that means, actually? What does curriculum vitae actually stand for?
I think I've managed to get this one wrong twice in a row, haven't I? even though you've told me the answer once. Yeah. I got what vitae mean. I think I figured that out from having Latin beaten into me as a young lad at school. But
okay.
Yeah, vitae was life, if I remember rightly.
That's correct. That's a good one. Yeah, vitae, so like the word in English language that we use that comes from it is the word vital. So there's a relationship to that. So yes, vitae is the word for life. Are there any guesses in the chat from the guys?
We have indeed. I think we've got Paul who's come in and he said story of my life or life story.
Okay, spot on. That is good. Very good. That is exactly what it means. Well done. So yes, it is actually a Latin term that means the story of your life. Yes, very true. Okay, so what is a CV for? Let's ask you guys, what is a CV for? Tell me what comes up in your mind. What do you think? What do we do? Why do we do a CV? What is it for?
This is the one where I keep sort of skipping ahead by a stage, isn't it? And thinking that it's for reason X. I'll let the guys type their answers into the chat at the moment. I won't give this one as away, as I think I have remembered the actual answer this time. So I will keep it to myself. But
yeah,
there's multiple reasons. There are really no wrong answers here, are there?
Yeah, well, there will be, no doubt. Oh, well. But I'm sure if you just have a quick think about it, then you will come up with some good suggestions. What is a CV for? What's its purpose? That's what we're looking for, really.
I'll give the guys a couple more seconds to type up some answers if they want to, and if not, I think I'll give the answer that I've got sitting at the hind parts of my brain.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not looking to catch somebody out here. We're not testing you either. We're not giving anybody points here. Just looking for what your opinion is. There might be different opinions, and it's always good to have different opinions on these webinars so we can discuss them. It gives us even more to talk about. So that's good. Okay.
Yeah. Sticking with the first names, we've got a couple of answers in the chat. So Paul 2, because we've got 2 Pauls, has put a record of someone's career past, and Shannon's put a record of previous jobs.
Yeah, okay, both correct. Absolutely, yeah. Anything else from you to add to this, Ted?
Yeah, I'm going to say that a CV is to get you an interview. That's what it's for. To get you to interview.
To get you an interview, and you're in a nutshell, you're probably right. It's only, or its main purpose is to get you a job interview. You could argue that as soon as a CV has gotten you an invitation for a job interview, it's almost done its job, almost, and that's why I'm saying almost, and I'll tell you in a second why. So, what is a CV for? A CV is your own personal marketing tool. Yes. And what it does, it helps you to sell your skills, your strengths, your qualifications to an employer, your experiences, yes, all the jobs that you've had, the education you've gone through on, etc., etc. And here's the other point there. Even once you've had the invitation to an interview, what the employer often does, and those of you who've had job interviews, particularly recently, will probably have noticed that in most of these interviews, the person that's interviewing you will have a copy of your CV in their hand, and they use that as an agenda for the job interview. And that is then really just to ask you more specific questions about certain skills that you may have developed, certain experiences that you may have had, certain job titles, job experiences that you've had in the past. So they're using that as an agenda for the actual interview. Great. Okay. So that's very, very general then. So the question is then the next one, and let's see what the guys are saying to that one. It's a fairly basic one. When would you use a CV? What are the occasions where you would use a CV? What are you thinking about there, guys? Let me know what you think.
Can I ask you for more specifics on that? Because
yeah,
you'd use one as we talked about to get an interview.
Yeah,
but when else are you thinking?
Well, just give me maybe more specific examples of where exactly. Cool. Yeah, maybe specific examples we're looking for here. When was the last time you used your CV? How about that? Let's start.
Last time I used my CV was when I applied to get my job at Springboard.
Yeah, that's probably the last time I've used mine as well. So it's quite a while ago now. That means my CV is probably completely out of date. But because I've been with the company for 7 years, you've been with us for how long?
Just over 2.
So your CV will probably be out of date by now as well. So there's a lot of things that I know you've done and achieved at Springboard already. So there's lots of things that you would have to add to that whenever you decide to move on.
It'd be quite a session to type that up. Yeah,
it would be quite something. So tell me then, anything from the chat coming from the guys?
No one's coming in on the chat, but I've got some ideas. Oh, here we go. Paul 1 has said when applying for a job via email or via an online application. Perfect.
Yeah, excellent. That's what we're looking for. Well done. And okay, anything else you can think of, Ted?
Yeah, so there's something that you taught me about as being quite important when doing CVs to think about was speculating.
Yes, absolutely. And this is basically what we're talking about here. You can really split this into two sections. Now, you can either respond to a job advert or some kind of a vacancy. So this is where you have found out that a company is actually looking to employ somebody. They have a live vacancy, and you could find out this via the internet. That could be the careers page of a company where you find out about that. It could be a website from the job center. It could be an online portal like Indeed or Total Jobs or anything like that. It could be even on Gumtree. And so, and in physical terms, it could be just something as simple as being an ad in a newspaper, or even just a sign inside a cafe, bar, restaurant in the window or in a shop window saying help wanted, or we're recruiting for, hand in your CV. So these are all occasions where you would use your CV when you know that this business does have a vacancy. The other part is when you are speculatively approaching companies in one form or another, and that could be in person, it could be via email, it could be via normal Royal Mail, and you don't actually know if they are actually recruiting right now, but you're approaching them hoping that maybe now, if not now, in the near future, that they might have a vacancy that might be suitable for you. Now, here is the interesting question. I would like you all to take a guess on this one. Every day in the UK, and let's just say today, obviously with coronavirus at the moment, things are slightly different, but even before that, so there's a certain number of job vacancies are filled every day in the UK. And in percentage terms, how many percent of these jobs do you think are actually never advertised? Take your best guess in terms of percentage. So this is where actively, say a company has a job available or a job coming up soon, how many of these vacancies are actually advertised and how many of them are not advertised in percentage terms every day in the UK? Let me know your opinion.
So Wolfgang, whilst the guys are having a think on that and typing their answer up, we've got someone waiting in the lobby who I'm just going to admit, which is going to take a little bit longer than usual as we're in a recorded session.
Okay.
So I'm just going to let them in and say hello and etc. etc. Hello, okay. New joinee. I'm not going to mention your name just yet to the person who's just joined the call. I'm just going to let you know that we are recording this webinar, and I'm going to read you a brief statement. If you would not like to take part in the webinar because it is being recorded, please feel free to leave at any time. Please make sure your camera is switched off, and that if you have any questions, you put them in the chat. We record webinars for funders, for internal training, and to make these webinars accessible to people who can't make the live times. We store them securely and for a maximum of 5 years. You can leave the session whenever you like, and if you do speak and you would then later like the webinar to be deleted, we will do so. If you do want to leave now because the webinar is being recorded, we will make another session like this available to you that isn't being recorded, most likely next week on Tuesday at 2 o'clock again. Neither Microsoft Teams or Springboard store any information about you, including your IP address. Having covered that, I'm going to post a link in the chat. If you would like to stay and you are still here, then please click on the link that goes into the chat and just type your name and stuff in there. And then after that, I will refer to you only by your first name.
Okay. Great. Well done, Ted. Okay. So that's quite lengthy. Yeah, I hope that's not going to happen.
It is quite lengthy.
Right.
I think from this point I won't let any other later comers, not late, but later comers in as saying that is a bit distracting.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah, it's a bit tricky that. Okay. Have the guys put any guesses in the chat?
Yeah. So Paul 2 has come in with 95%. Paul 1's come in with 90%. Shannon has gone for the same thing as Paul 1 at 90%. So we've got a fair few going in there. Yeah.
So the 90%, does it refer to the amount of vacancies that are filled without being advertised or being advertised?
90% unadvertised.
Unadvertised. Wow, that's a very high figure. That's really quite a high figure. The actual reality is somewhere between 70 and 75% of all vacancies that are filled in the UK every single day are never advertised. So around about 70 to 75%. So somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4, which is still a huge amount. And what that means for us, or for any job seekers actually, means that if you are applying only for jobs that are advertised anywhere, whether that's on Gumtree, on Total Jobs, on Indeed, at the job center, or wherever, if you're only applying for these jobs that are advertised, then you will miss out on a huge part, actually the biggest part of the job market. That's it. So speculating then is a big part of applying, or should be a big part of applying for jobs. And we spoke about this before, Ted, that in previous programs, if we are running an employability program in big cities, for example, like in Glasgow or in Edinburgh, in the past we have taken the entire group out to go around businesses, so cafes, bars, restaurants, hotels even, and going around and handing in their CV speculatively and asking if they have any vacancies at the moment. And literally every single time we've done that, there's always been, in a group of 12 or something like this, there's always been at least one, sometimes several people did manage to get a job there and then. So this, in our industry, can still work, that you can just approach a company and without knowing whether they're recruiting or not, and even just walking in. Now, of course, not right now at the moment during the coronavirus, but when things are getting back to normal, that is still possible. Now, in some businesses, that tends to work better than in other businesses. So I'm asking out to the guys again, what is your experience? Has anybody of you ever gone into a business, handed their CV in? Tell me about your experience. Or if not, tell me what kind of business do you think it would work well in to hand in your CV, or what other businesses would it maybe not work so well in to hand in your CV speculatively? Let me know what your experience is there, or opinion. Ted, in the meantime, tell me, you did used to hand out CVs quite a bit in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, I always used to go and give mine out by hand. I have very rarely applied for a job online. It's something I've not done very often. And actually, it was only latterly that I started doing it. But when I worked in hospitality, especially when I was going for my first few jobs or moving from one company to another and deciding that I wanted to try something new, I always used to go around with a stack of CVs, go in, try and find the manager, shake their hand, and put a CV in their hand.
Yeah,
because that worked well. And actually, I learned that although that was part of the right thing to do, you've highlighted when we did this session last week that I was doing something wrong, because I used to try and set myself a target of handing out too many CVs in quite a short window. But I think we're going to cover later on how many we should do and what time we should do them at when we get there.
Yeah, I would definitely say that we're going to give out some tips there for people who are still happy to do something along those lines. There are certainly some things that work quite well, some things that don't work quite so well. I take it, Springboard, you obviously didn't walk into our business and just hand in the CV. How did you get the job that you're in now?
So I used to volunteer with the Springboard charity as a sort of guest interviewer, which is something that we use on courses. And I knew Stuart, who used to be our business engagement manager. That's right. And Stuart sent me an email saying, "Hey Ted, we're looking for a trainer. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yes, I absolutely would be interested in."
Right.
So I sent him my CV, which I believe he gave to our boss Inga, who then invited me along for interview.
Great, and the rest is history. Fantastic. So what's coming in from the chat then? Anything coming in from the guys?
So the chat conversation is actually about a technical issue with using the chat. Thank you very much for the heads up through the I believe Facebook Messenger group that you guys have that Robert wasn't able to type on the chat. Potentially for the trainees having a bit of trouble typing on the chat, if when you see a message flash up on your screen and you tap on it, you can usually reply to that message. So every time Wolfgang asks a question, I will just put the word answer in the chat, and then if you tap that, you should be able to type on it like this. So if you want to tap on that, Robert, then you should be able to get into the chat like that. And if that doesn't work, We will have to intuit your thoughts through the ether.
Yeah, okay, let's try that then. I think I've got some psychic abilities anyway, so
Nice.
that should work quite nicely. And so, did we have any response to our last questions then, or was that just a bit of a technical issue there?
I think that one got lost in the world of online.
Okay, well let's forget about that. So we're talking about.
No, cancel that. Here we go.
Okay, something was
So,
coming.
Paul 1 has said that he believes that the speculative approach can be used for most jobs. However, there are certain exceptions, such as the armed forces.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. You can't just walk into an army barracks and hand in your CV. I don't think that's going to be very welcome. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Wow. Can you imagine how that would look? Anything else?
No, that's the lot for now, boss.
Okay, well, let's talk very briefly then. What kind of companies would work well with to hand in your CV? What kind of companies it wouldn't? Ted, what's your experience or opinion on what type of company would it work quite well in? Let's stick with hospitality. What type of hospitality companies it would work quite well to hand in your CV in person, and where does it maybe not work quite so well?
So for hospitality specifically, I think that almost anywhere you can go speculative as long as you speak to the manager, but it works best with smaller and medium scale businesses that only have 1, 2, 3, maybe up to 10 units within their business. Once you start getting into the much larger companies, who I won't mention by name, but some of them own up to, I think the largest one in the UK is 8,500 individual units.
Wow.
They have a very set online process for applying, and it's one of those ones where you don't even use your CV. You have to copy and paste your CV into different boxes that they've got, because they've got a huge HR function who dissect it and put people in the right place, and etc., etc. So I would always say the smaller businesses, and actually Paul 1 has just chimed in and said family-owned businesses as well. It works especially well.
Yeah. Very true. I totally agree with you. So in general, you're absolutely right. It's small to medium-sized businesses where that works still very well. Large companies, corporate companies, they have their own application forms and websites, and you need to go through sometimes quite a time-consuming process to apply for any kind of jobs. And if you would walk into some of these big companies, what they often tend to do is they just refer you to their website. They say, you know what? I can't actually take your CV. Just go online, apply for your job, and then it will pop up on my computer screen, and I can have a look at it then. So small, medium companies, that's still the thing to do. Now, here is a thing of what works well is when you go into one of these companies and you are very happy to and confident enough to do that, then first of all, what do you think, Ted? What could be the advantage of doing that over approaching a company virtually via email or even via phone call? What do you think could be the advantage of going into a business, handing your CV in this business in person?
I think it makes a lasting impression. And I suppose there are so many advantages. I'll just go quickly off the top of my head. Making a lasting impression. So speaking to the manager and giving them a firm handshake, eye contact, handing them your CV and saying you may or may not, and it's not just for businesses that are actively recruiting. This is the speculative as well, as saying you may or may not be hiring at the moment, but I'd like to hand in my CV as I like this company for X, Y, and Z reason. And I think that I would really enjoy a career here. And that stays in the mind. Whereas, when I used to use Gumtree a lot for advertising for positions, when I would pull down, 200 odd CVs within a couple of days to have to roll through, 6 seconds was me looking at a good CV. It was, if they were badly formatted, the second I opened it, badly format, immediately close.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about 6 seconds you have with an employer, basically, if you send your CV in via email or via some kind of an online portal, if you are going in person and you meet the right person in the business, then you have a lot more than 6 seconds to convince them that you're the right person. And you are doing that not only by giving them a piece of paper, but you're doing that with yourself, the way you present yourself, the way your basic communication skills, your smile, your eye contact, your handshake, the way you dress yourself, and you just have so much more to show off there, so much more to offer. And yes, this is where we come to the first big tip here. If you do this kind of speculative approach, definitely what to do is tip number 1 is only ever give it to the right person. So there's no point of making the effort and going into a business asking whether you could hand in your CV and then leave it with a cleaner or a waiter or a bartender and say, can you just pass it to the right person? That is an absolute waste of your time, because
waste of paper, waste of printing, waste of money.
Absolutely, and a waste of time, etc., etc. And all they're going to do is they're going to put it somewhere where somebody's going to spill coffee on it or a drink or whatever. It ends up in a bin, and there's no guarantee it will end up on the desk of the right person who's going to make the decision. So what to do instead is you go into a business, you ask whoever your accountant there, it's like, could you tell me who's in charge of recruiting? And then they will tell you the name of either a manager or an HR person, and then you ask whether that person is there. And if that person is not there, then you just ask them politely when they would be most likely coming back, and then you just make yourself a note when you come back at that time, and then you can ask for that person by name, because you will then have that name. That already makes you look much more prepared, which is excellent.
Agreed. Now, we've had. I'm gonna hold you there. So we've had an excellent one in the chat from Paul 1, and the first half is something we've covered already. It allows the employer to get to meet you and see you in person and get a feel for what kind of person you are. The second bit is excellent. It allows the employer the opportunity to potentially give you an interview there and then if they are free.
Exactly, absolutely, because that's what I used to do always. When I was recruiting, when I was a manager in a hotel and somebody had the guts to just walk in at reception and say, I would like to hand in my CV. Is there somebody I can speak to in regards to recruitment? I would always make an effort, even just for 5 seconds. Even if I was very busy, I would come out. I would just want to shake that person's hand. I want to just look into their eyes, and I wanted to see what basic communication skills they had. And you could see that easily. And then if I had the time, then I would even say, you know what? Let's just grab a seat in the corner and tell me what you're looking for. And then you have such a huge advantage over these hundreds and hundreds of people who are emailing CVs in, because that they haven't got that chance of making that impression personally by looking you in the eyes and giving you a smile. And so this still really works very well. My second tip for if you are keen to do this, if you're happy and confident to go and walk into a business and hand in your CV, is second tip is choose your timing carefully. We talked about this before, Ted, but it's really no point of walking into a restaurant asking for a job as a waiter or waitress or anything really, and doing that at 1 o'clock at lunchtime in the middle of lunch service.
Yeah.
Because that's just absolute nuts, because you're just showing that you have really no understanding of the industry, because you're walking in just at the worst time of the day really to do so. So Ted, tell me, what do you think is the best time of the day, and maybe even the best day of the week, to walk into a business to hand in your CV? What do you think works?
Thank you for prompting on the day of the week, because I did it last week and I wasn't sure if I was being too specific or not. But I have a very strong opinion that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday between 2:30 and 4:30, if the business is open at that time, is the best possible time to go in. You're between the lunch service and you're not so late that you're cutting into what's called a manager's pre-service brief for the evening session. So they finished the main rush from lunch and they haven't yet started doing a team meeting to talk about what they're going to do in the evening, which is usually just a 15 or 5 or 10 minute chat to go over specials and items that need upselling and etc. etc. So I would always go in at those times. And it's also a time during which 2:30 to 4:30 that the manager is unlikely to be involved directly in service themselves, as they should be quiet enough to be free to complete office tasks. So when you ask to speak to the manager during those times, you can actually get them face to face. Now, Paul 1 had pipped me to the post on that by saying that he always aims to go in to employers at times which are more likely to be quieter, which allows free time to speak. So that's the ones that I'm highlighting: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2:30 to 4:30.
And on this note, I actually read very recently a story of a celebrity chef. I'm not going to mention the name just now, but you will know, everybody will have heard his name. And the way that he got apparently his very, very first job in the industry was he came out of school, he had no experience, never had a job. And I think it was a 16-year-old, he just knocked on the door of the back door of a kitchen in a famous restaurant, and he just happened and he did it at 7 o'clock in the morning. And or just after 7 o'clock in the morning, which is quite something. And apparently the head chef of the restaurant opened the door for him, who had just come into work. And he handed in the CV and he said, you know what, I have no experience, I've got no skills so far, which is probably untrue, but I'll do anything. I'm just looking for a job. And the head chef apparently was so impressed with this young boy turning up at 7 o'clock in the morning that he said, you know what, come back at lunchtime and you can do a trial shift and work on the pots and pans there for over lunchtime and see what you can do. And the rest is history. So he became one of the most well-known chefs in the country now. So for kitchen, it's maybe slightly different. You can actually go, I think early morning time is probably still a good time to go as well. Anytime maybe before lunch service. So anytime up to about 12 a.m., 12 noon, sorry, is still a decent time to go if you're looking for a kitchen job. But for any front of house position,
that's a good call, yeah.
Yeah, any front of house position, I'm with you on that one, Ted. That's for sure. Okay, right. Are there any other questions in the chat for the moment?
No, I think we're clear. We can fly onwards.
Right. Okay, let's move on here. So it's all about you. Absolutely. A CV is an opportunity to show an employer why you're an ideal candidate for the job. Yes, it's an outline of your education and your experience. Here we go to what you said earlier. Its only purpose really is to get you an interview. Its most important purpose. It should stand out from the crowd. That doesn't mean that you write it on pink paper or anything like this. But everyone has potential. Everyone has more skills than they think they do, and everyone can write a good CV. So how does that look like? We're going to look at that in just a second. Couple more things about writing your CV. So it's a continuous piece of work. So what that means is you need to keep it updated. Do not let your CV get out of date. Every time you've had a training program, like for example, a Springboard training program, add all the things on that you've learned, the programs, the certifications that you've got, your qualifications, any additional skills that you've acquired, add that onto your CV. Make it positive. And that's a key thing here. You need to have all the language in your CV has to be positive, ideally interesting as well. But this is all about highlighting your achievements, your strengths, the things that you're good at. And we've talked about this before, Ted. You know, mentality-wise, if you look at Americans, this comes maybe to Americans maybe a little bit more naturally. They love talking about how great they are, whereas British people are maybe a bit more reserved, and they say, well, yeah, you know, example, you go in America and you ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, great. And you ask you do that in Scotland or in England, and somebody you ask the same question, how are you? And they're like, oh, I'm not too bad. You know, yeah. It's a mentality thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a mentality thing. Yeah. So British people are a little more reserved and maybe not quite so openly enthusiastic always. So this CV writing is the time where you want to switch to American mentality, not maybe 100%, but more so in that direction. You don't have to say that you're the greatest person in the world, but it's all about positive language. It's all about highlighting things that you're good at, things that you've learned before, your skills, anything positive that you've done in your life, and that's what your CV is really for. You don't write in there the things that you're not good at, and that's for sure. Okay, now we come to the time where we're going to look at how a CV should actually look like in detail. And this is how it looks like. This is the order of how a CV should look like. This is how your information should be organized on your CV. And let's start, before we look at these in detail, let's say a CV, and this is widely accepted as a standard, should never be longer than 2 pages. Now, if you are a very young person, you have very little or no work experience, it's perfectly okay to have your CV on just 1 page. But in any case, your CV should never be longer than 2 pages. So, Ted, what are you guessing then? If you're a guy like myself who is, you know, not the youngest anymore, who's got many years of work experience there, if I would write down every single work experience, education, training program that I've attended in my life, I would probably have a 5-page CV. What should I be doing, in your opinion?
I would start with making sure that all of the experience that I was referring to on my CV was relevant to the job that I was going for. So you might have had a career for 10 years as a financial assistant. And if you're going for a job in hospitality, there are probably some key skills that you could include in your key skills that you learned whilst doing that.
Yeah.
But if I needed to cut that experience out, I would maybe remove the description of what each of those roles was and simply list those roles towards the end of the CV. I have to admit, when we were talking about this last week, I was wondering if I should disclose this. But when I when I applied to Springboard, I was writing my CV and I got up to 6 pages.
Oh my goodness!
I was closing in on 6. I think I was 5 and a third.
Still in your 20s. You were still in your 20s then.
I was 29. I had a few different jobs and an interesting and varied career.
you must have started when you were 12 years old.
I did include some previous experience. I did have I had a waiting tables job when I was 16 and 17, and I've been working in retail. I've had a job on and off, but pretty much on. I've had a job since I was 13, working at Midland stores in Jersey.
Great. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the key thing is you need to make sure, obviously, that the relevant stuff is on your CV. Now, don't just cut things out if you don't think they're relevant for your CV, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you have suddenly big gaps time-wise on your CV. So I don't know, you have a job 5 years ago and then nothing until maybe 6 months ago, just because the stuff that was in between was maybe not necessarily 100% relevant to the job you're applying for now. You just would spend less space and time of talking about these experiences in your CV. Or another example could be, obviously, there's absolutely no point of writing any details of my school grades into my CV there at high school level when I'm in my 50s. It's absolutely not relevant for the jobs that I would be applying for now. So that you can cut that out. So yes, tailor make your CV always to the type of job that you're looking to go for. And that means you can have a retail CV, you can have a hospitality CV, you can have a CV going into another industry there, and then just make sure that you spend more time and space on the jobs that you've had, on the training programs that you've attended, on the qualifications that you've gained that are relevant to that industry, or even more precisely, even better, that are relevant for that particular job that you're going for. So you don't just have one static CV for all different kinds of job industries. Make it specific. And it's always better to sending out 6 CVs that are individually tailor-made to the jobs and industries that you're looking for, rather than sending out 100 CVs that are just standardized CVs that are not referring in any shape or form to the actual industries or jobs that you're going for. Does that make sense?
I think this was the bit that I used to do wrong. So I used to try and target 40 or 50 CVs within quite a tight window each day, and that was that. And I used to occasionally run between venues to make sure that I was hitting that target, and it worked. But I think I got lucky, because I would have been better off doing 10 and walking so that I appeared nice and didn't seem sweaty, but also individually tailoring them, because mine was just a hospitality CV. And I wasn't tailoring it. I was applying to front of house and back of house and different roles within those with the same CV.
Okay, and that presents its own challenges there. But yes, I think my tip would be just take your time, look at, if it's a vacancy that you're applying for, go and look at the details of what they're actually looking for. Yeah, they're describing usually the kind of person that they're looking for in that job. Vacancy there. Take some of that exact language and build it into your CV, and we're going to talk about that, where you can do that in a minute. But let's just start with the details of how we organize our information. So we begin with the personal details, name and contact details. Now, in terms of contact details, guys, can you just write down your opinion? What kind of contact details do you think should be on a CV, and what contact details should maybe not be on a CV? We're talking about addresses, email addresses, Facebook profiles, Instagram profiles, mobile numbers, home address, that kind of stuff. Which one of these details do you think should be on a CV? And what kind of information should maybe not be on a CV? Tell me your honest opinion. And I can tell you that already now, there are always discussions about where people have strong opinions on some very basic issues where some people think that should be on a CV, and other people, no, that should definitely not be on a CV. And I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think there. What of these contact details should be on your CV and what not? Anything coming up yet, Ted?
So whilst people are doing a quick type, we've had a question from Paul too, who said, do I put that I'm currently on job seeker on universal credit on my CV? And I've said yes, as it enables the employer to see the duration of the gap between employments and not need to wonder why there's a gap on the CV. But I've also said that I'm going to ask your opinion on that.
Okay, so Ted, what's your initial thought?
So I thought yes, I would put that on, and for the period that I had been seeking a job, I would put that on as well, because when you leave gaps on a CV, employers go, "Ooh, where's there a gap there? What's going on there?" And then they start wondering about it, and then they just toss your CV.
Yes, so gaps on your CV is always a tricky one. It's probably one of the biggest challenges that people have. It is always good to be able to write something in there. And I've had examples, and it doesn't necessarily ring true for everybody, but you could, for example, write things in like where you have been volunteering during that time. You may have spent some time volunteering in charity shops. You may have been caring for an elderly relative. You may have looked after your children or whatever reason. If there are reasons like that, that's obviously much easier to talk about that in a CV and put it in there. If you have just been job searching and it's quite a lengthy period of time, then prepare yourself that if you are getting an interview, that these people are going to ask you, so what did you do during that time? Say, for example, you've been looking for a job for 2 years, and you have not filled that time with anything like volunteering or caring for an elderly relative or anything like this. Then just prepare yourself for the fact that you're going to be asked by the employer, so tell me, what did you do during those 2 years? And just make sure that you're comfortably be able to describe what you've been up to during that time. Anything coming from the chat then? Anything else?
We do, yeah. So Shannon said name, email, phone numbers, and home address, and then has put in, you don't put your date of birth on your CV.
Okay, interesting one. Yeah.
And that's about all of it. I know that the contentious one sometimes is home address.
Yes, the contentious one is sometimes home address, and I've heard job advisors to telling their clients, don't put your address on your CV. Now, I'm going to talk to you about this from an employer's or ex-employer's manager's point of view. I always like to see the home address of somebody on their CV, so I can see where do they live, how long would it take them to get to work every day. Yeah, if I am a restaurant or a hotel in Edinburgh and you would be living out in Livingston, then I would certainly, one of my first questions to you would be, so how are you going to get here every day? Now, there are links, and there are a lot of people from West Lothian, for example, who are working in Edinburgh, et cetera, and even vice versa. But you need to obviously be quite well informed in terms of how you would get there, particularly if it's public transport. You need to know exactly how often the buses, trains, or whatever goes there. So I would always recommend that. Whereas other people feel strongly about it, they say, you know what, it's particularly if you live in a certain area that is not maybe particularly wealthy or glamorous, that you should maybe not put the exact details on there. So this is where trust your own instincts and see what you think. I personally always thought it was a good idea to put a home address onto a CV. Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that one, boss. It's provoked a little bit of convo in the chat. Paul once said that he wouldn't put his complete address on his CV, but would put his local area, which is exactly the right thing to do if you're not confident in putting on your, or don't want to disclose your full address. Rob said that usually puts exact address down. I have to admit, I like to put my exact address down too, and I like to put it in a cover letter.
Yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Very true. Yes, these are good answers. So I like the fact if for whatever reason you're not comfortable putting your exact address down there, put at least the area roughly where you are, or even the city. Edinburgh, so that they can see that you're somebody local, because everything happens via internet. A lot of things these days in terms of job applications. I remember having people applying for jobs in Scotland that were living in the south of England, and I would ask them, why are you applying for this job? So it's always good to know where somebody lives. That's for sure. Right. Next one is the personal profile. Now, question to the guys out there: what sort of things do you think should be in a personal profile? Now, we talked about this before, and we're always quite passionate about not having the sort of standard stuff in there that a lot of CVs have in there, right? Meaning things like, I'm a hardworking person who's great at timekeeping and fantastic working in a team, or using my own initiative, because that's what everybody is being advised to write into these personal profiles, and that makes them really the opposite of personal, and therefore they're just a waste of time. So, question to you guys out there: what would you think should be in a personal profile? What kind of information should be in there? Or maybe even just write down for me what should not be.
Oh, a good one. What should not be in a personal profile?
By the way, I like the fact that somebody said earlier that the birth date should not be on the CV, and that is absolutely crucial. Yes, you should be getting your job because of your skills and your experience, and not because of your age. That's for sure.
That's bang on. I did I remember to mention that one? I did. Okay, good. Yeah, that was Shannon, who was absolutely crushing it.
Yeah. Anything else coming from the guys out there?
So I'm not seeing anything coming through for the personal profile just yet. Shannon saying that the chatter isn't working, but saying it by typing on the chatter.
That's funny.
Okay, I get it. I remembered. Are you having to tap the? There you go. That should help if you want to tap on that one to reply. I'll remember each time Wolfgang asks a question to just tap the word answer in there, so that you can click reply on that. It's a strange one that keeps happening on your phone. I'm going to say what I think should be in a personal profile.
Come on in. You come on in, yeah.
I think that your personal profile should be personal. I don't think it should include things like, I'm a great team player, I always turn up on time, I work really hard, because everyone can type that. So it should be, for me, for instance, it should say, I'm keen on jiu-jitsu and like doing X, Y, and Z, as it shows that I'm active and like exercise and partake in, and we go with a team to events, and it demonstrates a number of things. Now, you could put it in hobbies, you could put it in personal profile. It depends. Where do you think that one should go?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's some things that should be in hobbies and interests, and jiu-jitsu, for example, for me should be more in that category, unless you're applying for a job as a jiu-jitsu teacher. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Personal profile should be, yes, very personal, should be tailor-made to you, should be about you in person, and it should really be something that when you read it, that some of your friends that would read it would recognize you in that. So it's not it shouldn't be just something generic, something that could that it doesn't really apply to anybody. So personal profile, first of all, it's got to be personal, and then after that, it's there should be some information in there. So again, this is really where it's important. This is an opportunity for you to tailor make your CV to a specific job vacancy. So you can read about the details, again, as I said before, of what they're looking for, what kind of details, what kind of a person they're looking for. And then you can use exactly some of the words, some of the language that they've used in the ad, in the job ad, in your personal profile. So if they're saying, I'm looking for somebody who's got 1 year of experience as a waiter or as a bartender, and that's, that is you, then you can write down, I have 1 year of waitering experience. That kind of things. Or if there are any specific skills that they're asking for, you need to be great at cocktail making, then and you have that skill, then you can refer to that in your personal profile. So make it personal and relevant to the job that you're applying for. Personal profile is where you have an opportunity to really tailor make your CV to a specific industry, but even as far as going down to tailor make it to a specific job. I hope that makes sense.
I think it does, boss. Paul 2's put in the chat, it's a short introduction which outlines your personal characteristics. And I think the key word there is short. How many sentences would you say, Wolfgang, a personal profile should be?
Well, I'm just wanting, first of all, to remind ourselves that, you know, a CV on average is being looked at for 6 seconds. So if you make it too long, nobody's going to read it. So 3, 4 sentences, absolute maximum, no more than that. Should be a short paragraph. It should have things in there of why you think you would be good at that job, meaning you can talk about your personal strengths, or skills or experiences that you think are particularly relevant for this job. Something personal as well. Yeah, you could talk about something that, you know, character-wise, personality-wise, you know, something along the lines of, I don't know, if you're wanting to apply for a job as a bartender or as a waiter, you can write in there that you're a very bubbly, outgoing, friendly person. Yeah, that kind of thing, because that's the sort of thing that you want to have as a waiter or as a bartender, because you're going to be customer facing. You're going to have to be very positive. So to write something like this in there, something that's personal about you, that could be very suitable and helpful for your CV. Okay.
Brilliant. We've got Paul 1 tapping in. Says, also likes to mention certain things that may not have been asked for in the ad, but could be beneficial to employer, such as I currently hold my first aid certificate.
Brilliant. Perfect. Yes, spot on. Or something like this, you have a personal bar license, or you know, something along those lines. Really, really good. That's a good comment. Yes, very true. So anything that's relevant. So yes, last summary about personal profile, make it relevant and tailor make it to the job that you're actually looking for. One example I always give is, I used to have people sometimes apply as jobs as waiters or bartenders to me, and in their personal profile it mentioned that they have got years and years of experience working in retail and they're looking for another opportunity in retail, and it's just, you know, nonsense. They haven't even done the most basic effort there. Okay.
Yeah. No effort at all to delete that and replace it with the word hospitality.
Yeah, I mean, it's so little effort nowadays. You know, you just literally, you know, in the olden days, in you know, when you had to literally retype the whole CV. You know, you couldn't just exchange one word and then print it out again. So nowadays it's so easy. So there's no excuse. So key skills is the next section, and key skills is something that doesn't have to be on every CV. It's often used for people who have maybe not got a huge amount of work experience yet in their lives, and they want to highlight skills that they have maybe gained in schools, in being part of a sports team or whatever, that may be relevant to the job that they're looking for. But key skills ideally should be, if you're using it, should be a short list of maybe, I would say, bullet points, 5 or 6, not more. And they should be, again, very specific skills that would be useful in the job that you are applying for. So if somebody is applying for a job as a chef or as a kitchen porter, and you've already had some experience working in a professional kitchen environment, that could be one of your key skills or experiences. Yeah, make a bullet point, 2 years of experience working in a professional kitchen environment. Boom, put it right up there. That kind of stuff. Great communication skills. You'll be detailed with it as well, yeah. Or you've got your qualification in World Host, or you have a qualification in your personal bar license. You could mention that in there. You have as a chef, you know, 3 years of great experience working, you know, of using your knife skills and developing your knife skills. Or you're particularly good at working in Italian cuisine or that kind of stuff. You know, make it relevant again to the job that you're applying for. Otherwise, if you have quite a lot of relevant employment history, you might not even have the space on your CV to do a key skill section. Do you have a key skill section on your CV, Ted, or would you have one if you would apply for a job tomorrow?
I do, yeah. I put a key skills section slightly differently. I put my key skills section after each employment. So I give, you know, a title, the name of the business I worked for, the period that I worked at it, and then the job title that I held. I put a brief description of my role, and then I bullet point the key skills that I picked up in that role. Now, the only reason I do that is because I've worked in a few different industries, so I like to track this key skills back from different ones to a central point. But actually thinking about it, I think if I was going to go and apply for a job now, I'd just do one key skills section just to make it easier and faster for the employer to read.
Yeah, and that's the key thing that you want to do, and I'm a big fan of bullet points. Keep it well structured, make sure that the information that they're looking for is easy to find. So let's go on to employment history briefly. That should be the next section. That should be the section where you start ideally with the last job that you've had and then chronologically work your way backwards in time. Now, there are three different things that an employer is looking for about every job that you've had. First thing is they want to know the name of the business that you worked in. Second, they want to know what kind of a job title you've had. And third, they want to find out how long did you actually work for there. Now, these three bits of information you should really highlight in a way so that they stand out from each job that you've had on your CV. So I would put that in bold. I'm not a big fan of underlining anything because that makes things look messy, and we've talked about this before.
Yeah, me neither. Bold is good, underlining is bad, yeah.
Yeah, simple as that. Don't use underlining. It makes the CV look messy. Use bold instead for headings or for things you want to highlight. So these three pieces of information, the name of the employer, ideally location as well. So yeah, Edinburgh or Birmingham or wherever it is that you've been working, right next to the name of the employer. Then write down the job title and the dates that you've worked there. And that should be highlighted in bold ideally. And then underneath, you can either do just a short paragraph, and really, again, it should be short, maybe 2 sentences at the most, describing roughly what you were doing there on a day-to-day basis, what you've achieved, what you've learned, what skills you've developed. But you can also use that as a bullet point list. As I said, I'm a big fan of bullet point lists, and that's where you can write down exactly what skills you've accomplished there. Now,
brilliant.
Anything else about employment history?
Yeah, Paul once come in said, I like to outline what type of contract I held with an employer, especially when my time with a company was short for a reason such as a temporary contract or filling maternity leave. And that's absolutely bang on.
That's if you're
picking up a contract where when you get the job, the contract is only for 2 months because you're covering a member of staff who's got a full-time contract there who's off for a while, it's absolutely vital to outline that during in the description of the job. Temporary contract with TED Limited, and that lets people know that you weren't there for 2 months and then left suddenly because you didn't like it or it didn't work. It lets them know you were fulfilling a temporary contract. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's a really good example, really good addition. Thanks for mentioning that. That is very true. Only write down, if you had a temporary contract, write it down. Then people will understand that you weren't fired or you left there for genuine reasons. Okay, moving on to education history, very similar to employment history there. Now, first of all, stick to the stuff that's relevant to the job that you're applying for. So, for example, something that you don't need to give out huge details about all the different grades of your standard grades and higher or whatever you may have had, and whether you had a B in chemistry or a C in English and so on. That doesn't necessarily need to be on your CV if you are applying for a job as a bartender, because that's no longer relevant. You could use maybe the space on your CV for more relevant stuff there. But write down the name of your school that you went to, the year that you finished there, and then of course any kind of higher education over and above that, put that on as well. You can put in that section, you can also put in any kind of training programs like Springboard's training programs, you can put that on there. And again, chronologically, ideally start with the most recent one and work your way backwards in time. Okay.
Brilliant. Yeah. Rob's just saying that he's got all of his previous training programs before the education, which is perfect because they are a type of education and they've been done more recently than school. Brilliant.
Very true. Yeah, a lot of people do that, and that's certainly the right way of doing that. Now, hobbies and interests. That's sometimes a contagious one. It's quite an interesting one. Contentious one. What is well, this is out to the guys on chat. Ted, let them do give them an answer there, an opportunity to put an answer in. What sort of hobbies and interests do you think are suitable to put on your CV, and what maybe are examples of hobbies that are not so suitable to put on your CV. What's your opinion on that one? And let's take as an example, you would be applying for a job as a waiter or as a bartender. What sort of stuff would you write in there that you think would increase your chances of getting a job like that? Or maybe what would decrease your job or completely ruin even your chances of getting a job in that environment if you would write certain things in hobbies and interests? Is there anything coming through yet?
I've just tapped answer here. Paul 1 said it depends on the job being applied for. Absolutely. So if we go with the example of just a waiter or a bartender in let's say a fairly nice restaurant / bar.
Yeah, let's stick with that one.
Somewhere beneath your local, above your local pub, and beneath your Michelin star type stuff.
Yeah, something decent. Yeah, something that you would feel comfortable walking in there by yourself and not feel intimidated. Yeah, absolutely.
A fair few, aren't there? Because sometimes you think, I want to write down all of my hobbies and interests, and then you wonder, I'm going to give a bad one. So if I love reading on my own in complete silence. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a bad hobby to write down on a CV. Well, I think you already know why, don't you?
Yeah, well, this is where I'm going to bring up the example again of a CV that I've looked at in the past. So this is somebody that sent me a job application, I think was for a waiter or waitress or something like this. And she said in her personal profile that she was a bubbly, outgoing, friendly person who loves to be around people. And then in her hobbies and interest sections, what she wrote down in there, that she just enjoyed reading, swimming, and walking.
Those all feel quite
which is obviously very strange. It doesn't quite match, you know. If you are a bubbly, outgoing person that loves to be around people, and then your main hobbies are things that you do by yourself, then you ask yourself, that feels strange there. So at the very least, you should say, I don't know, you're part of a book club if you are. Never lie on a CV, of course, or something along the lines of, I'm part of a swimming team. That shows that you're at least with other people there, or you're part of a walking club there. But that was one that I remember that stood out for me, where it was just complete discrepancy between the personal profile and then the actual interest that she apparently had. Is there anything coming from the guys in the chat about this? What do they think?
Not just yet. It's strange how such small changes to the one you just mentioned turned them from being negatives that jarred quite strongly with the personal profile into really strong positive. Part of a swimming team player, exercise, excellent. Part of a book club, okay, interested in research and learning and sharing that understanding, excellent. Part of a hill walking group, brilliant. Yeah. We've got Paul 2 jumping in, saying he volunteers for a community twice a year, organizing a local beach and carnival and dress a mascot. Brilliant. Absolutely. And says, could I put it on? Yes. Perfect.
100%. Yes. Anything where you're volunteering, especially when you have been unemployed, or when you are employed, or even if you're not. But if you are employed and you're using your time like this by volunteering, that always looks good on your CV. An employer will always think, you know what, that person, they may have had troubles finding a job, but they used the time helping other people. Brilliant. That person, I want to meet them. Yeah. So anything else coming from the guys on that?
That's us, boss.
Okay, so here are a couple of examples. So any kind of sports activity, I would say, are great, especially when they're team sports, when you can show that you're part of a team. If you're captain of your netball team or something along those lines, that is definitely something you want to put on there. If any achievements that you've done, I don't know, if you have a black belt in karate, write it down. That's fantastic. That looks like you committed, that you can commit to something, that you can dedicate to something, that you can learn, that you want to excel, that you want to become really good at something. These are all things to really put in there that are very, very positive there. Anything else that you can think of, Ted, that could be positive in terms of hobbies and interests that would make an employer think, you know what, I want to meet that person?
Absolutely, yeah. I always like it, just like you said, people saying they take part in sport, but even smaller things like, for instance, on mine, in my hobbies and interests on my CV, I always say that I'm extremely keen on going out and eating in multiple restaurants. I word it nicely and fancy stuff it up, but I basically say I like going out a lot because connects to the part of my personal profile where it says I'm very outgoing and I love talking to people, I love meeting people, and I love trying new things. I like going out and trying new food and eating in restaurants and being in hospitality because it's just the best industry. Yeah.
And that's a great thing about wanting to work in our industry. You know, that is actually a good thing, showing that you're going out. If you apply for a job as an accountant and your hobby is going out all the time, that doesn't quite fit. You know, whereas for us, it's a great excuse. You know, we can do research. You know, we're going out not just to have a great time. We're going out to do research. We want to check out other companies, other businesses. We want to try cocktails. We want to try wine. We want to try foods that we've not tried before. Then it's all part of research. So if you word it cleverly, you can certainly put that in the hobbies and interests. There's one or two things I want to mention that I would not recommend to put on there.
Oh yeah.
Number one, and even so, most people nowadays do that, is video games. Okay, so playing Xbox, playing PlayStation. If that's the only thing that you're writing on your hobbies and interests section, it just makes you look like a bit of a loner, like somebody who sits there until 4 o'clock in the morning and then is struggling to get up in the morning for their work. I wouldn't write that necessarily on your hobbies and interests section there, even if you feel that you have some, I don't know, completed some amazing levels in any particular computer game. Even that, or particularly that doesn't always come across very well on a CV. And second of all, maybe watching football. What do you think about that one? If you follow a team, let's not name any specific ones here in Scotland. That's sometimes a little bit challenging to talk about teams. But if you follow a particular team and you go weekend after weekend, you try and follow them and go to games and so on, would that be a good thing to put out in the CV, Ted? What do you think?
I would maybe put I've got a passion for football, but because of Scotland having and other parts of the country as well, down in England, down in Wales, and even over in the ROI and the NI, there being some contention and often some strong feelings about specific teams. I would never write which particular team I followed, as all you're doing is maybe preventing yourself from getting the opportunity if the manager who's reading your CV is a very keen supporter of their most
biggest rival,
vigorous rival. Yeah, exactly. So I would leave the teams out and just say I'm a very keen or avid fan of X, Y, and Z.
I would actually stick with football. If you're interested in football, if you're coaching football, particularly if you're volunteering with coaching football, or if you're playing actively football, put it on there. If you're just watching it on TV or just going to games, I would almost leave that out, because especially in our industry, you're most likely going to be expected to be working weekends. If you're saying that you have a season ticket for a specific football club, they'd be thinking, they will want every Saturday night, every Saturday off, or every second Saturday off, because they're going to the football games. So I would maybe leave that out.
So on the video games, Paul has said he's got a counter argument to your not including it on the hobbies, and then has put in a really solid answer. So Paul runs a community of gamers who are live streamers, and are gamers whose aim is to help people with mental health issues and things like agoraphobia. And as part of that, they've been personally invited to take part and attend Children in Need and several other charity events. So there are definitely strong positives to gaming and gaming communities supporting people with mental health issues.
Brilliant. But in that case, you'd have to be just as detailed as you've just been with us here. If you just write playing Xbox or playing a particular game, then that's not going to cut it. But if you write down exactly what you've just told us there, then that's a very different thing, of course. Yeah, and that's something I've not heard before. So that shows you how updated my knowledge is of that industry. So
well, I was tempted to chime in as well, as I'm a semi-regular video game player. I was playing Call of Duty Warzone last night. Shouldn't have mentioned the title as this is being recorded. Ignore that. And
other video games are available.
You play other games are available. We're like the BBC. You play with a team of people and you talk to them. And I was playing with one of my friends who's in Singapore and one of my friends who's down in London, who I obviously can't see at the moment.
Yeah. So, but if you worded just like, sorry, was it Paul who mentioned that?
Paul one who put that up, yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to then put that much detail on the CV, and then that changes things. So well done. That's a really good example. So thanks for arguing against my argument. I like that. That's great. So lastly, references, if the space is available, of course, I would. There are two options. references, you can either write down references available on request. That means that you only give out references once they are offering you a job, so that you would have had an interview by then, and that's perfectly okay to do that. If you are writing down the names of people that you would use as referees, then they would have to be, well, ideally it's expected to have 2. You would have to write some kind of contact details for them there, so an email address or phone number at the very least, and ideally the sort of name. So it's either the name of the business or the position that they've had, or they can see what kind of relationship you used to have with them. That needs to be the information there. And here's a key thing, guys, and this might sound a bit silly, but I've seen problems like this before. Make sure that whoever you're using as a reference, that they are definitely got something nice to say about you, that they're actually happy to give out a good reference about you. I have seen it before where people that I've worked with have applied for jobs, they've been offered jobs based on references, and then the references, the contacts that they've given out, have actually come back with a bad reference.
Yeah.
And then they've not been able to get that job, and that's a little bit silly, obviously, there. So now, any questions about references?
None coming through about references. Rob's put that his work coach recently updated his CV, and it's now 3 pages long. So this is where I suppose it comes to the thing that Wolfgang highlighted at the beginning, is that there is no exact science for CVs. It's opinion based, but he can't say it because Wolfgang is going to be British about it and put down his own love for it. But Wolfgang is extremely passionate about CVs, in part because he's really, really good at writing them. So I'm going to go with Wolfgang and say 2 pages max is always really good, unless what you're including is extremely relevant detail all the way throughout and there's nothing you can cut. Feel free to contact your program manager from Springboard and absolutely bash through a CV with them, and I'm pretty confident, Rob, that that's me.
Well, absolutely. Well, go and have a look at the CV then, because that would be interesting to find out. That surprises me, actually, that a job advisor would tell you that your CV should be 3 pages long. That is a huge surprise for me, and I would strongly disagree with that. But as Ted said, it's not an exact science, and that's perfectly okay. Okay, if there are not any questions on references, let's move on briefly here. We've got a couple of things there. So we're going to be adding, Ted, you're going to be able to add that template again there onto the chat for the guys to access?
It's already up. If you go to, guys, if you go to your Flow dashboard and go to the notice board section, you'll be able to download the CV and cover letter template.
Brilliant. Excellent. So we've talked about all the top tips there. Yes, very much. Try not to repeat any information, even if you have been in the same type of role several times. Try to reword your responsibilities. Spot on. Okay, covering letters. Now, where would you use a cover letter?
Personally,
what do you think?
I like to send one with. Sorry, just a sec. I don't know why you managed to leave and come back, but you're back. You've already heard all the stuff. We're still recording, Paul, too, and we'll carry on. I like to send a cover letter with every CV.
Yes.
Now that I've got out of the habit of firing out as many CVs as possible and I'm doing it for quality, I like a cover letter with everyone, addressing, if possible, by name, the hiring manager.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a key thing here. Now, one thing here about the template that's on that screen that you have at the moment, for me personally, that's slightly too long. One paragraph too long of a letter there. But the template we've put up for you looks slightly different. It's more appropriate for the type of work that we're looking to get you into. Just use a template there. But yes, I would also strongly recommend every application that you use a covering letter, and it should have something very specific about the job that you're applying for in it. Yeah, and talking about why you think you should be considered for that job. So there could be elements that you've already used in your personal profile, and again, there could be things in there that you can that are in the actual job ad that you're referring to. That should be in your covering letter, and really just a very short paragraph, couple of paragraphs. If it's too long, people are not going to read it. Keep it short, keep it to the point. Highlight some of the information on your CV that you think is particularly relevant for that job. That means that you think, this is the reason why I think I will be great at that job. That's what the key thing is for a covering letter. One little tip. On Indeed or in other job portals, quite often you get the opportunity for a job ad to send your CV and then add a covering letter. Now, often people don't add a covering letter. They just send a CV. Now, I know that a lot of employers out there, now, if they have 100 CVs coming in, within 2 weeks for one job, then of course they are going to delete every single application that hasn't even bothered of adding a covering letter.
Yeah, as simple as that. If you got 20 with cover letters and 80 without, I know which 20 I'm reading.
Absolutely. So it is always better to spend a bit more time on fewer applications than trying to fire out 50, 80, 100 CVs with no covering letter or standard covering letters. It's not worth it. I know there's a certain amount of expectation and pressure from the job advisors in terms of the volume of applications and so on, but please do take your time of adding a covering letter that is tailor-made to the job that you're applying for. Grammar and spelling, absolutely key. Being positive, again, absolutely key to your application. Okay, now, are there any questions from the guys?
On covering letters, no, not as yet. We just had a little technical hitch, but that's all sorted, and we're back to rock and roll. So I think we can jump onwards.
Okay, we're actually come to the very end of this webinar. It's really just, are there any questions from anybody just now?
I've got my traditional question for you, boss.
Yes, I kind of expected that. Come on, fire it out.
It's become a tradition. So if I had fallen asleep at the start of the webinar, or zoned out, or had been on mute and playing video games in the background, and you had 30 seconds to give me a couple of top tips on what I should remember from this session, what would they be?
Okay, top tip number 1 is apply for jobs, not only for job ads or vacancies, also spend time researching companies that you would like to work for and apply to them speculatively. That's top tip number 1. Top tip number 2 is every single job application, whether it's speculatively or applying or replying to a job ad, add a covering letter. And top tip number 3 is make sure that your covering letter and your CV are tailor-made to not only the industry, but ideally also for the job that you are applying for. So, does that make sense?